another episode of Puppet Storytime with me, Newton! Yay! Thank you for tuning in. This week, I'm very excited to share with you our book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Mom read this book to me when I was a kid. I'm still a kid, but when I was a younger kid, and I just love it. It's called Goodnight Opus by Berkeley Breathed. Thank you very much, Mom. Try to keep your head out of the shot. Thank you. Berkeley Breathed, Goodnight Opus. Yes, you can see the penguin at the top there on the bed. He is Opus. He's the star of the book, and it's based on Goodnight Moon. I bet many of you out there know Goodnight Moon. Yeah? Well, this one's based on Goodnight Moon, but it is not quite Goodnight Moon. Let's just read it and see what happens. I'll see you inside. Bye! Goodnight Opus by Berkeley Breathed. People who never get carried away should be. Malcolm Forbes said that. Okay, let's go. Which book, dear Opus, may I read you tonight? Asked Gramma with love at the start of that night. Why, my favorite, I said, the one with the rhymes, the same one you've read me 209 times. And just as it is with all proper grannies, she ordered me into my pink bunny jammies. Then she sat and said hush, and her voice filled the room. Good night, she read softly. Good night to the moon. And good night to the lamp and the little toy boat. Good night to the mittens, all hanging and soaked. Good night to the floor. Good night to the walls. Good night to the rug and the door and the halls. Good night, Tiny Mouse, and good night, Blue Moonshine. Good night, Grandma read the 210th time. I can't really say how this happened next. After 210 times, I departed the text. Ho ho ho! Good night, I yelled, jumping. Good night, far away. Good night to you all in my Milky Way. Sit back down, Grandma said. Get back into bed. There's no one up there, and that's not what I read. When your sight surpasses what's plainly in view, pull your head from the clouds. Keep your ground to your shoes. Now, let's finish the story with no Milky Way. It's improper that folks get so carried away. But she read no further. She said nothing more. Yes, Grandma had paused for a snooze and a snore. Now, I take full blame for all that came next. For I continued the story, but departed the text. That meant I started using my imagination and made things up. Ho ho ho! Let's see what happens. Good night, I yelled down. Oh, whoopsie. Good night, I yelled down to the chap neath my bed. Good night to you, big-nosed, blue-footed biped. I'm sorry I've missed you each night, but tonight I was told not to focus on things out of sight. Yes, good night, said the beast with the toes taffy blue. I've been here for years and not noticed you. Let's finish your story and get carried away. We'll wish them good night in that far Milky Way. My friend winked to me as his voice dropped to whispers. Let's go there ourselves. Wish it right to their kissers. A team's what we need. That's just what I said. So we signed up my pillow and gave him a head. dear Grandma. There's no need to tell her. We hoisted and snuck her down to the fruit cellar. She'd hear nothing there as she snored in her slumber. Comfy and snug under tons of cucumber. This book is cracking me up. Our crew was complete, my Milky Way team. We boarded our Milky Way flying machine. Powered by dreams, with some blue-footed help, we launched from the roof and let out a yelp. Good night to the city! Good night, all you people! Then we sideswiped a kitty and shortened a steeple. Whoops! We flew past a fairy in need of some sleep. She'd spent the whole night just collecting old teeth. They rose to her girdle and covered her feet. There were heaps upon heaps, 2,000 feet deep. Good night, we yelled down. Whoops, good night, we yelled down. And she waved us over. She wished to resell an old Elvis molar. Ooh. We dropped in to check on the Washington scene, where I talked with Abe Lincoln and told him our scheme. He said he himself had chased a few dreams, but now that he's marble, he wished for small things. And what, I then asked, would you most like to do? A swan dive, he said, so we stripped and did two. Whee! That was me pretending to do a swan dive. We flew past the sailors of the Blue Mist Lagoon, where for 10,000 years they've fished for the moon. They've seen it up there, and they just want to hook it. They dream that one day they might baste it and cook it. Oh, good night, I called down. We'd help, but we're late. We're off to the stars. They yelled, bring some bait. We flew through the clouds, and that's where we met all those wonderful folks aboard that big jet. We yelled them, good night, till our faces turned purple. But theirs turned to white, like they'd swallowed a gerbil. We haven't a clue as to what caused the scare. They slipped by quite nicely, with inches to spare. Then we soared higher up, till the whole sky was filled with lovable friends that the Milky Way spilled. Oh, this is my favorite page. There, all above us, 6 billion udders. No cow dads around, just milky cow mudders. Good night, I called out. Good night, one and all. They served us ice cream for a Milky Way ball. 'Twas time to go home, and they wept and said, no! Then they kissed us goodnight, all 6 billion or so. So, here is the freshest of up to now tips. If you're due a cow smooch, avoid those cow lips. Mwah! I found my way home and collapsed on the floor, not long before Grandma showed up at the door. I told her all of what happened that night, that I stepped out for once and followed my sight, and that sometimes it's good that we look for a way to depart from our text and get carried away. For years, I've thought back to how Grandma had listened to all the great things that I said she'd been missing. How that night she had paused at the foot of my bed and smiled at those Milky Way cows overhead. I'd sure like to think that one night or the next, she'll get carried away and depart from the text. The end. Wow, I really love that book. I like that Opus made up his own version of Goodnight Moon because he'd read that book so many times. 210 times he read that book. So it was time to try something new. So he made up his own story about going to the Milky Way and meeting cows and fishermen fishing for the moon and the tooth fairy and all sorts of fun adventures. Yeah, it's a good reminder that we can always choose to depart from the text, or in other words, make up our own stories. Yeah, and then we can go anywhere we want in our imagination. Wow, our imagination, it's so powerful. And I really like that he was helping his grandma use her imagination too. You know, at the end of the book, how he was hoping that she would depart from her text and go off on her own adventures. See, that's the thing. We all have our own text. We all have our own journey, our own path. But it's okay to let our imaginations take us somewhere that we didn't think we could go. I think it's really the most powerful thing. Imagination and love. I think that's where love comes from, is our minds, our hearts. That's where our imagination lives. And it's so powerful that we can send out love, just like we can send out things from our minds and our hearts. We can send out love to everyone and anyone that we think of. Wow. I'm just going to let that sink in a little bit. There's a lot of space to sink in my 4 points. Wow. Well, you know what, kids? I think it's time for our song. Yes, and I've been very inspired lately to depart from the text, as it were, and make up my own songs. So I took the tune of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and put some new words to it. My song is called Once Upon a Storytime, and it's sung to the tune of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And I've got some puppet friends that are going to join me, and you at home can join me too, because we'll have the words on the screen at the bottom so you can see the words. Well, we'll see you inside our song. Bye! Once upon a story time, I read my book for the 100th time. Since I now know what comes next, I chose to depart from the text. This time I made my own tale about a guy with blue toenails. We traveled to the Milky Way and met some cows who like to play. Now it's time for your own tale. When it comes from you, you cannot fail. And now it is time for your own tale. I would like you to make up your own song or your own story. You're welcome to share it with us or keep it for yourself. Either way. But when it comes from you, you cannot fail. That is the truth. Word. All right. Well, on that note, I will see you at our next puppet story time. Until then, stay you, stay awesome. No one can be you but you. And we need you right now. We need your light in the world. So until next time, I'll say goodbye. Goodnight Opus. Oh, shoot. How do we say that author's name? Oh, dang it. Cut!
This time I made my own tale about a guy with blue thumbnails. Oh no, blue toenails, not thumbnails! Cut!
Move out of the way before you close the door. That's my advice to you, buddy. Sorry.